Welcome again. On behalf of the Middle East Institute, I want to thank all of you who've come to this event today, some from the region or from Europe and from other places. It's my pleasure to welcome you all today to this conference on landmines, IEDs, and other explosive hazards in the Middle East, addressing a growing threat. During the course of the day, 2 keynote speakers and 3 panels will lay out the landscape and the current threat of IEDs in the Middle East from North Africa to Afghanistan. We will have the opportunity to hear from individuals from the region, practitioners from the international community, and experts in the field of explosive hazard removal to explore ways to improve methods to remove the threat of explosive hazards at both the technical and the policy levels. Today's conversations will map out the various threats posed by explosives across the region and examine opportunities to improve strategies and policy approaches. Before we begin today's program, please note that this conference is being recorded and live streamed, so that we ask that you silence your cell phones, but encourage you to tweet your thoughts and reactions using the hashtag MEI demining. We would like to thank Janus Global Operations for their generous support of this conference and look forward to a full day of discussion. And here to share with us some of her opening remarks and to introduce our keynote speaker is Ms. Gail Dady, a member of MEI's Board of Governors and a partner at DC Capital Partners. Gail?
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone. MEI is proud to host this conference, which will bring attention to an often overlooked humanitarian and security issue in the Middle East. This conference is the first in Washington, D.C. We think it's long overdue, which will examine the impact of explosives in the Middle East, a threat which is at an all-time high due to the region's conflicts, the operations of extremist groups, and the enduring legacies of past wars. Explosive ordnance, including landmines, IEDs, booby traps, affect communities in the region at every level. Thousands of deaths and injuries every year are the result of landmines, and medical treatment of injuries is increasingly difficult as chemical explosives and IEDs are used. Schools, hospitals, places of worship are also frequently targeted, impacting the daily life of civilians, as well as prospects for the country's stabilization and economic development. It is often a major factor in the inability to return refugees to their homes. So what are the primary challenges to addressing these hazards? How do challenges differ in countries where a civil war is ongoing? What are some of the most innovative strategies and technologies being used by the leading demining organizations? How do we increase international cooperation, and how can we draw greater attention to this issue in the policy circles? We are fortunate today to have someone I think many of you know, Ms. Lise Grande, who's going to share our thoughts with us. Lise has been working in this area for more than 25 years. She currently serves as the UN Resident Coordinator, the UN Humanitarian Coordinator, and the UNDP Resident Representative for Yemen. And she has served in similar positions in India and Sudan and Iraq. We look forward to hearing her perspective on the threat of explosives in the region from her experience in 2 countries where they threaten the lives of millions each year, both Yemen and Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, Lise Grande couldn't be here today because of the worsening situation in Yemen, but we have her remarks on video.
I am so sorry that I am unable to be with you today. Unfortunately, developments in Yemen have taken a dramatic turn for the worse, and I am unable to travel to Washington. I am particularly sorry for this, because this is a hugely important and very timely conference on an issue that impacts communities and countries across the broader Middle East, from Libya, Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, Syria, and Iraq to Yemen, where I am currently serving as the head of the UN's humanitarian operation. Explosive hazards, and here I mean landmines, ordnance, and IEDs, are being used and misused in alarming and deeply disturbing ways. They have become a weapon of choice for many belligerents and are being used indiscriminately in many battles. At the end of the 9-month battle, for example, to liberate Mosul in Iraq, the longest, largest urban battle since World War II, the UN teams working under the UN's Mine Action Service immediately started to identify, mark, and neutralize explosive hazards. From June 2017, when Mosul City was liberated, until June of this year, UNMAS clearance teams removed 43,700 separate explosive hazards, including 1,000 IEDs. They removed these from roads, bridges, schools, universities, hospitals, clinics, water treatment plants, and municipal buildings. And they removed more than 450 suicide belts, many from human remains. The impact of these devices and these weapons is absolutely enormous. The numbers are numbing. In the last 4 years, the number of people dying and injured from the explosive remnants of war and victim-operated improvised explosive devices has literally doubled. Last year, the number of victims increased nearly 40% from the year before. 92% of all of the victims of these devices and weapons are innocent civilians. 25% of the victims are children. The truth is that it's probably impossible to calculate the full human, social, and political costs of explosive hazards. They hurt literally every aspect of public life and literally every sector. Until hazards are identified, marked, removed, and deactivated, people can't go home. Businesses can't open, farmers can't plant, herders can't move their livestock, students can't go to school, nurses can't provide health care, and engineers can't repair the road, electricity, water, and sanitation grids. Everything that needs to be done when a country comes out of conflict can't be done as long as these weapons and devices are present. There is another point we need to make, and it's a sensitive one. Explosive hazards are being used, increasingly used, to instill, deepen, and perpetuate fear. In Iraq, ISIL intentionally used IEDs for this purpose. When people tried to return to their homes in the city of Ramadi after it had been liberated from ISIL, they were killed by ISIL IEDs when they opened their front door. People were killed in Ramadi when they opened a cupboard in their kitchen. Children were killed in Ramadi when they picked up a doll. IEDs were even planted in the Holy Quran. This was terror being inflicted remotely in the most cynical way on innocent people who wanted nothing more to return home and start to rebuild their lives. All of us who care about what is happening in the Middle East are being confronted with a reality that we cannot ignore. Explosive hazards are putting millions of lives at risk. They are undermining recovery in countries coming out of conflict, and they are being used to spread fear across the region. Clearly, we all need to do something. The question is what? I'd like to suggest that there are at least 4 things we can and urgently need to do. First, and arguably foremost, we need to prevent the indiscriminate use of explosive hazards. This means we have to talk to belligerents about their responsibilities under international humanitarian law and the Ottawa Treaty, and we have to convince them to change their behavior. Not easy to do. ISIL, for example, has not been open to dialogue with the international community. But just because it isn't easy to talk to belligerents and help them to change their behavior, it is all the more necessary that we find the determination to try. Second, we need to have expert teams ready to identify, mark, clear, and neutralize devices and weapons as soon as the fighting stops. These teams need to be resourced, recruited, and in place, ready to go during the fighting, so that as soon as the fighting does stop, action can be taken. Third, we need to educate civilians about explosive hazards so that they can identify them and know what to do if they encounter a device. Fourth, international authorities, including the Action Service need to work with national authorities to determine if sufficient expertise exists at the local level to address the explosive hazard threats in that country. The expertise required to deal with the kind of complex IEDs we are increasingly seeing is very rarely present. In Iraq, for example, many brave national Iraqi deminers were killed trying to neutralize the IEDs that had been planted by ISIL. If the right kind of capacity doesn't exist in a country, we need to mobilize international experts to fill gaps and ensure there is a process in place to identify and dispose of hazards quickly and safely. The threats posed by explosive hazards in the Middle East are already widespread, and they are growing. So much of what we all want to see, communities being rebuilt, families coming back to their homes, economies on the rebound, depends on dealing with these threats. This is why we have no choice now but to take strong, decisive action.
I will convey, I'm sure, all of our thanks to Lise Grande for that excellent and very thoughtful introduction to our conference. We're sorry she couldn't be with us, but we certainly appreciate the need for her to be in Yemen at this point.